Welcome to Memphis Machine,
a Muddy Pig production. I'm Jonathan Bass.
And I'm Carl Casperson, and together we're looking to show off the creative sights and sounds of Memphis, Tennessee.
Amen.
We got to sit down in this episode with Dr. Jack Cooper.
Yeah, who is the chair of the jazz department at the University of Memphis, multi-reed
Yes.
gentleman, player,
Yes.
composer and arranger extraordinaire.
Right about the time I moved to Memphis, he was just wrapping up fundraising for his Charles Ives
project. Yeah, that was a killer project.
It's a remarkable project of him combining his favorite hits from the 20th century, somewhat avant-garde composer Charles Ives, and setting that music to a big band format with killer players, great arrangements. He also travels extensively. He had a residency for the Berlin Jazz Orchestra, arranging for young voices of Brandenburg.
Still maintains that residency, I believe.
Yes.
He's kind of
yes. But his perspective on the Memphis scene, his is informed by just being all over the place and working with all sorts of professionals and students, and just really enjoyed our time sitting down, kind of getting his bird's eye view of what the music scene is like today, here and abroad.
Hope you enjoy.
Boom. Welcome to Memphis Machine, Dr. Jack Cooper. Jack?
Yes.
Dr. Jack, Mr. All of it, right?
All of it. At one point it was Sergeant. So.
Right.
Professor of Jazz Studies at Memphis University.
Yeah.
Very cool. Man, thank you so much for being with us today. We are upstairs, of course, in the addendum to Ernestine and Hazel's
Nate's bar.
Nate's bar, and it is not 90 degrees.
Oh, man. It's taking
Holy
a turn.
cow.
Yep.
So another big thanks to Ernestine and Hazel's for putting up with us and letting us exploit their space. So we usually typically start off with a little bit of biography. You know,
sure.
How did you make your way to the Memphis scene?
Well, I guess I can back up a little bit before that, is that I grew up in Los Angeles, and I got a couple of degrees there, one on clarinet, and played a lot of jazz and studied with guys that were working in L.A., and studied with a guy who was with the Tonight Show, with the Johnny Carson show.
Okay, this is weird. Wait. Okay,
Yeah,
what time era? What era was this?
This is late 70s, early 80s.
Oh man, okay, I got to study with Joel DeBartolo
There you
from
go.
the Tonight Show.
I know Joel. I played a couple of gigs with him.
That's so cool. All right, so continue on. Thank you.
Yeah, so I studied with Bob Curnow, who was the staff arranger and the A&R man for the Stan Kenton Orchestra. I studied a lot with him, and then several other people out there studied classical composition. I did my master's in composition, and then I moved to New York. I had a great opportunity given to me because I auditioned for the sax section for the U.S. Army Jazz Knights, who are stationed at West Point, which is only 35 minutes north of Manhattan. So I kind of got to take advantage of several things at once. I was touring with them, and then I was working in New York, all the way from Manhattan all the way up to Albany, on my off time. And then I also did more study out there. I studied with Manny Album, who was with RCA, and studied composition with him. So I was there for 6 years, and then after that, went back and did my doctorate at the University of Texas. I was in Austin while the whole kind of Western swing, that whole thing was going really well. And I was working with two bands there, did my doctorate, and then I got the job in 1998 at the University of Memphis. I got the appointment for being the director of jazz studies. So I've been at the University of Memphis for about 20 years now, and been doing all kinds of stuff, and so I guess the rest is history in a way. So yeah,
That's great. Go ahead, Jonathan.
No, I was going to say, going back to L.A. and getting your start and everything. What was it like then, trying to play there and making the rounds there?
Well, John, it wasn't easy. I mean, there's and it's tough there because there are a lot of guys competing for only a few gigs, and that's why for me, the opportunity came. I had always followed groups like the Airmen of Note, and the Navy Commodores and stuff like that. And I knew that both academies had big bands too attached to their concert bands, and so I kind of kept my eye out for that also. So yes, if I had stayed in Los Angeles, I probably would have tried to compete for those jobs as a woodwind doubler and especially as a writer and arranger, because I was trying to do that. But the opportunity came to go to New York, and you know what? It was a really good decision for me because, as a kind of a side tangent, is that growing up in Los Angeles, a lot of people think that's kind of the center of the universe, and it's not. It's another end
don't
of the
tell them
universe.
that.
Well, I know, but I tell my students that I tell people that quite openly. While there are a lot of things that happen there, and certainly there's things that I've done that flow through there, and a lot of people I know, it was a good decision for me to go ahead and move out of Los Angeles to New York.
Yeah.
You know, and then you find out a lot of things about yourself and a lot of things about the world, and I really enjoyed being in New York.
So what was the opportunity? Sorry to interrupt.
Well, it was being with that touring big band with the U.S. Army.
Okay.
And I was in the sax section. I was one of the tenor players. And then also kind of what got me the job is I became one of the 2 staff arrangers for the group. While I was there, I did probably 90 charts.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I did a lot of writing. Well, see, and the thing is that opportunity, and it wouldn't have happened anywhere else for me to become a staff arranger for our Columbia Pictures Publishing and then Warner Brothers, because they knew that the guys that do what I do, like in Washington, D.C., and do those jobs, have to produce a lot of material in a very short amount of time. So that's the opportunity. And I kind of knew that because Sammy Nestico had that opportunity. Pat Williams had that opportunity. It's a list of people that had done that kind of staff writing and or touring with the touring bands, and then had gone into, going into Hollywood or New York or something like that. And for me, it was really good because when I went to go study with Manny, he saw that I had the job I had, and he said, well, it's great that you have that, but you're doing a lot of commercial arranging. And he was very encouraging because he saw my composing and arranging. He said, if you just went ahead for a couple of years, did the doctorate, and then were able to get a college teaching job, you could kind of call your shots and be able to, write anywhere from symphonic music to sonatas. And you guys probably have seen, I've been writing a lot of chamber music.
Yeah.
I don't think
the violin sonata. I heard not too long ago.
And I'm very proud of that. But see, my job affords me to be able to do that.
Right.
I love teaching. My mom was a teacher. I kind of knew about teaching and all the kind of stuff you have to deal with administratively, like we taught you,
right.
At the University of Memphis. There's some unsavory things that you have to deal with, but I'm fine with that because the overall job affords me a lot of time, and especially now with all the connections that you guys have seen I've made in Germany with the Berlin Jazz Orchestra over there over the past about 4 years. I have time off. My contract allows me time off. So, all in all, it was a good decision, and I don't regret Manny pushing me in that direction. Because I don't think I would be able to do. I get asked a lot. You're doing all kinds of writing, this kind of writing, chamber music. You're doing big band writing. You're doing orchestral writing for like the Memphis Symphony and other people. And it's like, well, my job affords me to be able to do that. I'm not. Manny told me his famous quote was to me. He said, "Man, you don't want to write Pepsi commercials for the rest of your life, do you?" So. Well, but there's a thing to that, and I'd really, that wasn't really super desirable for me, every once in a while, sure, I see, maybe 1 or 2 friends that break into doing a couple of film scores and stuff, and I in another life, I guess I would do that, but I'm pretty satisfied with my career, and especially satisfied with, like I told you, is that once we're done here talking, I got to go back home, and I've got a big commission with the New Zealand Jazz Orchestra, and it really is my job that has made that connection and those things to have happen. And it's a big commission CD that it's already slated for production in April. So, I can get stuff done fast, and it's not a Pepsi commercial.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
And not to get sidetracked, but you actually have a former student that is in New Zealand, or is it Australia?
Well, yeah.
Dave Lissick?
Dave. Yeah, Dave Lissick. And he did his doctorate with me at the University of Memphis. And, those have all been really good connections. Again, I can't downplay the connections that I've made at the University of Memphis and kind of in the academic field and academic artistic field. I don't want to say academic because really there's a lot of artists I come in contact with who accomplish degrees.
Right.
So Dave is one of them, and he has his own record label now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's done well. And through that record label and grants he gets in New Zealand, and they're very generous with grants because they need their professors to travel. Obviously, you have to. Everything's flying in and out.
Right.
You don't get to drive. There's no driving from New Zealand. It's all flights, so it's all expensive. But yeah, he's one of them, and there's several others. Jeremy Warren would be another one, the drummer.
Yeah, he's been killing it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he's great. Yeah. No, he's fantastic. He's Don Braden's drummer right now, and I'm very proud of that. And that's another thing is that teaching is not, as you know, teaching's not for everybody. You guys know it's, and it's unfortunate because I see that every once in a while. It's like, well, gosh, that's just not working for this person, or that person is not working for us in terms of teaching for us somehow. And you kind of have to split that connection. And it's nothing personal against someone, but it's just they're kind of not cracked up for that thing, and they don't have the patience for it, and they don't know. But I grew up watching a 30-year teacher and watching her having to deal with a number of problems. So, it's not that easy. Yeah. You just don't go into teaching. So, but for me, it's been the right combination of things in terms of both my artistic career and as a teacher. So I can't complain.
So with arriving to Memphis in '98, you've seen the city.
A lot of change.
The city bounce all over the place.
A lot of change, yeah.
And then also being afforded to travel like you have, and around the world. How's your view of Memphis changed or grown, or where are you at with your view of Memphis today?
Well, I overall it's good, but it is a mixed bag because I think gosh, it's hard because I'm going to kind of hit 5 different points, probably 5 or 6 different points by answering that question. From where I started in '98, still back over this way, I'm pointing back towards Beale Street. Right in back of Beale Street, where the FedEx Forum is back here. Yeah. It was still burnt-out buildings from the riots from the Dr. King murder. Right. I mean, that was still left over. Wow. That was a visible, tangible legacy. And for me, that's very tough. I mean, I not to get into the politics of it or anything.
No, it's a reality.
But well, and the thing is for we were the 4 kids in our family were raised reading Dr. King and a lot of other people, obviously, and he was a huge hero in our family, as Robert Kennedy was. But I don't want to get too far into that, But the point is that coming here, you still have that tangible reality that's sitting there, and it was a little bit. They were still fighting some things in terms of that stuff, and finally, gladly, some investors came in and they started redoing the city. Now, it's been a little bit tough. Because I think there are that's been some very positive things. There have been some very positive things on the campus of the University of Memphis in terms of new buildings, and cross our fingers, knock on wood. I hope our new building's going to go in soon in the next 2 years.
That's fantastic.
I hope so. But the one thing that I will say that I'm critical of is that there are a number of musical acts that I've heard come out of Memphis, and when you talk to people, certain people who are more in charge or have the resources to put into things from the past, they still kind of talk about Elvis and some other things and Stax, and that's not bad stuff. But the problem is that when I go out to a club and I hear a very good musical act that I think is very much Southern rock, pop, has a really neat combination of things, I'm thinking we should be pushing that, or whoever it is that can push that in that direction, they should have some backing. I mean, you know, and I'll be very upfront. One of the people who left, who's a good friend of mine, is Charlie Wood. He's doing wildly well in London.
Right.
I mean, he's been there for a few years, and he just kind of hit a glass ceiling here, and there was just not much more he could do, and that's unfortunate. I'm not lamenting it necessarily, but it is the reality. And
for our listeners, Charlie Wood does what?
Oh, organ. He's he's an organist, a world-class organist, and kind of he's a songwriter, a very good one, and they're kind of Mose Allison type of songs. Right. He did that, and he had that gig at King's Palace it was years and years, and I used to go sit in with him. That was one of the first things I did, is sitting in with Charlie, and I do that about every other week, every third week or something like that.
Right.
And there's just not there are not unique voices like that get promoted so much. So I guess, you know, there's a couple of different things to think about. I mean, there's a number of things that happen in Memphis that are good, and I think there are a number of opportunities that are here, and I tell kids that come here about those opportunities and what's going on. But they, like Jeremy, talking about Jeremy earlier, he took advantage of. Excuse me. He took advantage. He came in from Little Rock, and he made his own way. And the reason why he was able to transition and move to New York as one of our former students is we told him, well, you're going to have to go out and get it. And it's out there, but you're going to have to work hard at it. You know, and he had that gig at the Westin, that jam session at the Westin for it was about 3 or 4 years or something like that. And it was successful, and it went well. And eventually he kind of hit a glass ceiling too, and he wanted to play. And I mean, obviously, as a drummer, he's just at a world-class level.
He really is.
Right. And he wanted to be surrounded by more and more of those people, and he did. He made the transition. Again, I don't know if it's... I'm not saying that's a complaint or a lament or anything like that, but certainly he is very grateful at the things that he was given by the people in Memphis and the opportunities. He's very grateful of that. He and I talk about that a number of times, and we really helped him out to make sure he completed his jazz studies degree and his music education degree. He ended up getting 2 degrees.
Oh, great.
Right. So,
is it similar to, like, just occurred to me when I spent about 20 years in St. Louis, and St. Louis has a great jazz legacy. You know, Clark Terry, Miles.
Right.
And modern players like Chris Thomas, who's been playing with Brian Blade,
right?
Greg Tardy, and people would ask me, like, so tell me about St. Louis. So what the music scene? I said, overall, I feel like it's a great incubator.
Well, right. We talked to Richard Cushing in season 1, our very first episode, and we talked about this very thing, and he mentioned that the industry is just not here. And so it seems
I think
like
Richard's accurate. I know Richard well. I've known him for years.
It just seems like we need to figure out a way to. I mean, being an incubator is cool and it's good.
Right.
It's a great thing, but we got to find some way to maybe transition to
Well, to further answer your question, Carl, the thing is that it really is about finding the sound that's from here, anywhere from a Southern blues, a modern Southern blues rock, down through Cajun sound and so on, and someone backing and saying, let's put this person out on YouTube a lot. Let's put this person out on the road a lot. Let's do this, and that there's got to be some kind of backing that way, because any act that would come out of Seattle or Austin, Texas, or Denver or New York or Chicago. That's what happens. Someone's got to be able to have the foresight to be able to look down the road and do that, and that is a concern. It's been a concern of mine, and I do say that as a Jeremy Warren and several others, as they yes, they're part of the incubation process here, but then they end up taking off somewhere, and they do what they do. Yeah. And I don't want to sound maudlin or anything like that, but it is what it is. And you don't. The good thing about it is that you don't get a Jeremy Warren without that individual musician being able to go to college, learn the things of, in a very organized way and at the same time, every Wednesday and Sunday, he is the main drummer at his church, and he's getting that.
Yeah. Right.
And that's a huge thing. He has a feel for the drums and to lay out time and to listen for time, like very few players do. Okay. And that said, when you go to New York, when I talk to people in Berlin or in Munich, is that they talk about, well, we know the drummers, the James Williamses or the Tony Reedises or Jeremy in this case, and that's a unique player, and they get that from that unique place. So how do you? I mean, that's a strange thing. It's kind of chicken or an egg, kind of thing. What comes first, and how do you approach it, and how do you deal with that? And I'm not sure I know. I just know I've had these conversations. I mean, you guys know I'm a member of NARIS, and those are conversations when I was on the board, the Memphis board, of, what should we back and what should I don't know. It's tough. So it's a multifaceted answer to your question. I don't know if I have just one answer for you. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So over the 20 years I've been here, I've seen a lot of different things. And I hope at some point maybe a younger entrepreneur, a younger person who has some money, wants to move on, and they want to back something like that and hear something that's coming up, and it's not just the same old. It is truly a combination of things that's uniquely a Memphis and a sound that comes from this part of the country.
I'm going to pull a Larry King and just toss you a softball. A real, okay. So being you're in academia, of course, and you've continued to stay in academia, and you've studied and you continue to study. Let's talk about what does a jazz education afford someone in wanting to participate in the American experience of being a musician. Whereas like.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, to dispel the thing of like, you go to school, man, you're gonna lose the soulfulness of being a player, or whatever kind of pushback you might have. But if anyone has seen the Quincy Jones documentary, you could see what a jazz education can
I add to that actually?
Please.
And this might not be the question you're asking, but add to that by saying that to that student who is not necessarily interested in jazz.
Well, okay, I have my take on all of this. I was raised by a really good pianist. She was an educator. And so, I'm going to reveal a secret. I mean, this, is that my first degree is actually a music education clarinet degree, though while I was in school, I was taking arranging lessons and taking the arranging classes and improv classes and stuff like that. So I think that in this day and age, is that I try and have the students look at their degree as flexible as possible, even with how expensive the degrees are now, and they've gotten much more expensive. But I try and get them to open their minds a little bit about some different things that are really practical. What I was learning in school, I was getting the music education degree so that I would have an employable degree. Because to be brutally honest with you, a jazz studies degree doesn't have the accreditation thingy, the approval, the teaching rubric to it. So you can't really walk into a public school and get a teaching job with it. You have to go. You would have to go back and get the accreditation. So my first advice is to ask the student, if they come to kind of interview with me, is ask them about that. Well, have you really thought about the degrees and what they are? And actually the music education degree is the only one that applies paperwork-wise to that. You know, when you start to get beyond that, and if they say, well, no, I have my heart set on playing, I want to do A, B, C, and D, and it's like, man, you better be in the practice room 8 hours a day.
Right.
You better take what you get from the classroom and your private teachers, and you better start get in the practice room, and then on the weekend go out to a couple of jam sessions and start applying it. So to kind of answer your question, is that it's a rounded kind of, there's not just one way to this in terms of what's going on. And I tell them what I expect by the end of their degree when they do their senior recital. It's like, you better be able to play at this level and be able to show a competency at this level. It's not about the piece of paper, it's about your competency and being able to go out there. I mean, we've added more degrees. We've added the commercial music degree, and it adds a lot of singers to our program, and especially singers. I mean, if a singer, I'll give you an extreme. If we get a number of singers that come in audition, they read poorly, quite poorly,
right? And
that's just, it is what it is. I'm not trying to make any commentary on it, but by the end of a music degree, they've got to be able to read, and they've got to be able to go into a studio session and read down a commercial or backing vocals or something, and be able to get through that. They have to, or our degree is pretty poor. It's not worth the money it's printed on. You know, the paper it's printed on, it's not worth that money. So I mean, I don't know if that answers your question necessarily, but in terms of a jazz studies degree, I look at it really as the competency rather than the piece of paper. And the competency is a whole circle of things that I feel that the person has to be going for, and they got to fall in love with it. They have to fall. If they aren't obviously in love with this, then I highly suggest to them, you need to get another degree, and that won't prevent you from playing in the ensembles. I mean, one of my close friend of mine from Los Angeles, he's one of the top call trumpet players in LA, and he has an engineering degree from Cal Poly Pomona. And that's just the way it is. He just did a lot of study on trumpet and played in rehearsal bands and then university big bands while he was in school. And we went to the same community college together, and then he went to Cal Poly, and I went to Cal State LA. So in terms of that, I mean, who's to say? Right. I mean, the guy has he has a mechanical engineering degree.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of different facets to it. There's a lot of different things that you need to do and be aware of if you're going to go into music full time. There's a lot of things. I mean, I probably wouldn't make it just as a player. I do a number of things. I play, I write and arrange, I teach. So, and I like doing all those things. Mm-hmm. If you don't like doing any one of them, it kind of starts to narrow the field quite a bit. And you better start thinking, well, are you going to be able to augment your income this way or this way or this way?
Right. So, I mean, even a lot of the world-renowned musicians, I mean, they've got other stuff going on,
Yeah, they do.
That's another reality that students have to know. I mean, as time goes on, I mean, that you have to be more and more versatile, not just in your chops, but...
Well, I try and make the students aware of a number of different things. I mean, whenever we have that graduate pedagogy class about teaching, that's where I talk about not just teaching, but everything going on in your life in terms of what you want to do and how you're going to get it accomplished. I just had a long talk the other night about applying for jobs. I was in North Carolina. You guys might have seen on Facebook. I did that thing with the North Carolina Repertory Jazz Orchestra. this past week, and it went really well. But there were 2 guys in that band, great players, really, really great players. One was the Barry player and one was the lead alto player. And they're at about, one of them's 35 years old and one of them's 39 years old, and they're trying to get teaching jobs, college teaching jobs. And, excuse me, they're trying to make decisions of, one guy's, should I go get the doctorate? Should I not go? And excuse me, I'm sorry.
Ananda beer.
Yeah, it's the beer. Gotta blame the beer. So I don't have a cookie cutter answer. I didn't have a cookie cutter answer. I can make you aware of things, and I can make you aware, certainly, being on a number of search committees. I mean, I've been on a lot of them. I was just on 2 because we have a new saxophone professor, and Sam was,
he just stopped by
Michael.
Sunday. Yeah, Michael.
Good. Good.
Sounded great.
Well, yeah, he's fantastic, and I'm going to give myself one of these because he was at the top of my list, and we really picked through his stuff, and I sent out my final list to 5 different people around the country that are heavy hitter guys that are sax friends of mine, but they are professors and they have the studios at some major universities, and every single one of them said, "Mike's your guy. Mike Schultz is it," and I think we made a great pick. There were a lot of fine people on that list, but it's a combination of things, and I think so far so good. I'm pretty happy. Sam's pretty happy. I think the faculty's pretty happy with him. That I think we did our due diligence, but it's that weird combination of things that I think works for us. And I'll tell you, if Mike didn't say it to you, his mom and dad are teachers. He's got that thing. He's got that acumen. He kind of knew about it before he came to it, along with being, of course, we're going to listen to his playing first. Of course, we're going to see what's going on. And his playing just knocked me out, both on the classical and jazz end. But he's got that rare combination of things. And you've got to have that to be able to help students out. And he's sensitive to all the things that we're talking about here, in terms of what's going on. Does that kind of help to answer what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I was, as far as like, trying to get paid, employment, of course,
Sure.
the anxieties of procuring employment, but also just like the philosophical side of what is jazz. I know of some schools and music schools that have no jazz emphasis whatsoever, and to me that just seems like I don't get it. Like,
I mean, it seems like you know the language of jazz. Everything else in the pop world just would seem to come easier.
It
has to.
Because just because of where Western music is today. Like, I don't know how you've harmonically, like how you get along other than your ears, naturally, if you just work at it long enough. But like the joke is, or not the joke, but I would tell my daughter, I say, jazz is like the Latin. Like, I mean, you don't have to be a jazz musician, but it will afford you, knowing what is going on.
Well, Carl, it's the language that puts everything together. Because, and I can tell you this. I mean, we can sit here and talk about it in terms of this part of the country or somewhere in the U.S. But I can tell you, in my experience in Berlin, is that the jazz players, the guys and girls that know what they're doing in terms of the jazzing, are the more employable ones on a Turkish gig, Middle Eastern stuff, Croatian gigs, Greek gigs. It is what it is in terms of that, because the nomenclature and what we do and the theory and everything, that language that has come about through jazz and jazz education, that's where it is. That can explain all these different genres.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah.
So in your travels, you're bringing up Berlin and just Europe in general. What have you observed? I guess in regards to differences, trying to find the words here, in the hustle. Like how musicians there producers, composers, arrangers, the difference in the hustle between there and here.
Well, I don't know if it's, John, I don't know if it's that much different in terms of getting gigs and so on, is that you kind of prove yourself and people hear about you, and then they tell two people and they tell two people and they tell two people, and then you try and self-produce some things and so on. But, I guess what I see is that it is coming from a little bit different angle, because there's a word for pop music there, and it comes from a different way. It's Schlager, and Schlager is like kind of that old German roll out the barrel polka kind of influence stuff, and a lot of pop stuff coming through that. And unlike us, our pop music kind of coming sort of more out of the blues and Broadway, and it's just a really different angle. Yeah. So that's, and I get asked about that a lot. They, well, you're teaching in Memphis, you know the scene there, blah, blah, blah. And I get asked a lot about that because they just don't know. And they are asking to somehow, some way, try and get that more involved in their personal music or their personal style. When I'm interested, and I'm interested into seeing what is going on with them, because, I'm interested in labels like ECM and getting on with the WDR, the NDR big band. And so there's a whole different kind of more Euro vibe that's coming through that. And the Schlager thing too is you kind of have to know that tradition, be able to play in that and know the what you're doing backing those kinds of artists. So I guess in terms of I guess using your words, the hustle to try and get gigs, it's knowing the landscape, and it's a different landscape there, and those players and writers want to know more, and I want to know more coming my way. So I guess the more you know, the guys who I know are, okay, let's put it this way: the guys who I know that are making it, two different guys I can think of. And we all three of us have become pretty good friends because we're all writers and we're all saxophone woodwind doublers. And there is a bunch of stuff that we all know and have in common. I know a certain amount of European writers, and they certainly know a certain amount of, they know who Quincy Jones is. Mm-hmm. They know his writing. They know all that stuff. They know who Kenny Wheeler is, being from Canada and Britain and Europe. And they certainly know who Rob Pronk is, doing all the writing for the Metropole Orchestra in Amsterdam. But I know those too. I know all those people. And of course they know Ellington's music, and of course they know Fletcher Henderson's music. But there are certain people I can inform them about, and certain people I've been informed about by them. But my point is that there's a core of people, if you are aware, if you have a certain amount of music education in this pop and jazz thing that we do, specifically jazz, that are kind of common. It's kind of like the history book of this stuff. If you don't know the stuff out of this book, out of this history book, then it's going to be I just don't. I think you're going to be out of the loop.
Yeah.
So the successful guys I know that stuff. So that's a thing. Yeah. I guess that's the way I would approach it, or I can answer the question.
Cool. No, that's good. We can edit this out, but I was just well, hello. It happens once. Actually, it's happened every single episode.
Every single episode.
Yeah.
Just kind of get used to it. That was the quietest interview.
I know, right?
By far. Usually a half a body comes through that window right there.
I mean, I'd like to, and you've in other interviews have discussed your Charles Ives Mist project, but where's that at? Like, what point of maturity has that project? Where's that at right now with everything?
Well, this weekend, that was the whole purpose of being in North Carolina, is that the North Carolina Repertory Jazz Orchestra, that's what we did on the performance. It was a good crowd too, and the band played it really well. It's gotten lots and lots of reviews. The latest thing that it got featured on is there's a VDR documentary out of Cologne, out of that TV station that got produced through them and Accentus Music, and I'm on an interview. I interviewed for this thing, and it's a documentary about Charles Ives, and I'm right in the center of the interview for about a minute and a half, talking about the project.
Yeah,
and they're running the last track of that while I'm interviewed, and they're playing that, and then I end up saying something about Ives brought the music forward, and he's done this and this and this. And the first thing on the album, the first thing out of the project that was very desirable to me was the cage, because it sounds like the blues, because I converted over a 24-bar blues, and that's the end of the thing of my interview, and then it goes right into a soprano singing the original version of Ives' Cage. So it's a great documentary. Hopefully it gives the project that much more impetus, energy, and I can present that thing to the WDR, NDR, about doing more concerts over there and doing more concerts over here, of course.
Yeah.
Because I could see where it's a really slick documentary. This is an award-winning director and production crew. They did a lot of work on this thing over the past 6 months. I was interviewed in June, and then we just got they did the final edit, and the guy that I was working for this weekend at UNC Chapel Hill, we paid a licensing fee, and we got to premiere it here in the United States before it was even on the air, because it's going to be on the air in November in Sweden, and then next March in Germany, and then it's entered into the Montreal Film Festival. It's big stuff.
That's great.
This documentary.
So, what's the name of the documentary?
It's called The Unanswered Ives.
Okay. Yeah.
A biography of Charles Ives.
Yeah,
It's just for our listeners, we're talking about Charles Ives, the early 20th century composer.
Yeah, and this whole project was birthed out of a love. You grew up listening to Ives.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because of my mom's piano playing and everything, sure.
And for those who don't know, Charles Ives was somewhat, 20th century.
Well, he's 20th century. Some people call him avant-garde. He didn't call himself that. He called himself an American, a truly American composer, very Americana. And I think it's a lot of Americana and a little bit avant-garde, but not really.
Uh-huh.
It just if you know his music, he's an outgrowth of a number of different things, and he was doing it independently. His atonal stuff that he was doing was completely independent of Alban Berg or Schoenberg. Yeah. It was incredible how he came up with a system of how he would compose that way, but. I don't know. You can't call him out avant-garde because he's not, because there's so much Americana stuff.
Right.
Just that one version of "Shall We Gather at the River," it's very recognizable. Mm-hmm. But he uses all kinds of different chord substitutions. Sure. He was like the first guy 50 years before anybody that was doing chord substitution that way and putting in it's genius.
And it should be pointed out he was an amateur,
Yeah.
Insurance salesman.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Well, yeah, he was insurance. Well, he did have a music education. He didn't go all the way through Yale, but he did have a music education.
Kicked out, right?
Yeah, he basically got kicked out.
Mischievous guy.
Right. And then he said, "Well, I'm going to keep composing. That's what I do, but, during the week I'm going to be on Wall Street selling insurance." And that's what he did. And he made and it became Mutual of New York. It became the biggest trust insurance agency in the United States.
Okay. He was able to support a lot of artists that way too.
Yes, he did, and that's where his money went later. In fact, his whole Pulitzer Prize money he pumped into. He just said, I don't care about the award. I'm putting it back into new music concerts. So he was truly that. Everything, all his energy was that.
This was obviously it was a very personal endeavor for yourself. but like this wasn't something that you had. You didn't have a test group for this. I mean, you didn't ask folks like, "Hey, what do you think about a big band interpretation?"
You just say test group.
Yeah, right. I mean, like was this the plan for this was like this is very personal. I'm going to do this and just see what happens, or
well, it evolved. I mean, anything that I do evolves, and that evolved from. I kind of already had that music, knowing about that music and playing it in concert bands and stuff like the Country Band March, and then knowing through my mom when I was a little kid. But when I'd gone back to do the doctorate after I'd been on the road for 6 years, is that I took a 20th century class, and the guy who was it was part of the doctorate, and so the guy who was teaching it was a huge expert in 20th century music, and he had a book. And there was a section on Ives, and he had the cage. He had the manuscript of it printed in the book, and then he talked about it and all the different things it does for such a short piece. And so he played it in class, and he lectured about it. And I had heard it before. I'd heard it years before. And I guess I was ready for it.
Yeah.
I was ready to do something with it because it hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, there's something there, and I don't know what it is, but I'm going to find out. And I sat down. I went down. I was the only guy probably that day that did their homework, because I took the book home, and I went through it and played through it and at the piano and messed with it. And I thought, well, man, this might make really great orchestration, to expand it out into further orchestration. And I started to mess with it. And then started remembering back to other Ives things, and started to look at other Ives things, and it just slowly started to materialize into, hey, this will work. And fortunately, I was fortunate to I did have a test big band, because the number one band at the University of Texas is like a pro band. It's all graduate students.
The 1 o'clock band.
Well, that's North Texas.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is the University of Texas Jazz Orchestra.
Okay.
And they're very, very good. It's a good group. In fact, I was not even the oldest guy. I was like, had been out of school a while, and I wasn't even the oldest guy in the sax section. It was all people doing their doctorate. But I could bring something like that in and get the reaction from those people, and they loved it. They loved that first chart, and they're like, man, how'd you come up with this? And I said, well, I did.
Yeah.
I can't explain it, but I did, and it works. And so we ended up using that. And then the other thing is that I had friends that were up at the University of Northern Iowa, where Anthony teaches now, Anthony Williams, and one of our graduates. But they were more than happy to check it out, and they recorded that chart on an album. So I had a good demo. I had a really good demo, and then I did 2 other charts. I saw it materialize into being able to do a dissertation, making the point. The kind of the theory is that as arrangers, we have to be able to push the boundaries out further, and that's what we do. We try and find new material, and nobody really in the third stream, like Gunther Schuller and people like Don Sebesky, I didn't think they had done a very convincing job of making a band sound like a big band with that kind of like disparate material, like material that's outside of Ellington, that's outside of Cole Porter, that's outside of U.B. Blake, that's outside of Harold Arlen, blah 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 blah. And people have tried that, to me, unsuccessful. And I'm gonna. This would be the only time you'll ever hear me take a swipe at Herbie Hancock, but that album the new standard album where he tries to take some pop tunes, I don't think it works because the material just doesn't lend itself to that. There's just material that does and doesn't. And so my theory is that you have to find good material, and you have to find something that will work with that medium and with orchestration, and you'll be able to expand out and do it. And not every Ives tune does that either, because I've gone through every single one of Ives things, went through the whole Library of Congress recordings. I mean, I spent a lot of time at this, and so I had a master list. And I whittled the master list down to about 20, from 160 down to 20. Oh, wow. And then from that 20, which were pretty good, down to, 8 and then 3 that were really good, that I felt very strongly about, that I could do something with.
Yeah.
And even with that, the work isn't done. You've got a lot to do. So,
Hello.
Here we are. We're exposed.
Wait till that guy comes.
Shout out to Memphis Fire.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So,
I remember thinking that same thing. I remember when you when I read about you starting the project, and I was like, man, what is he going to pick?
Right.
And how are you going to do it? So, I mean, with that, like, you're arranging, and we can get into composition later. But how do you approach arranging? Do you have a core philosophy? I mean, what are some goals that you think about when you sit down to arrange maybe someone else's work? And like I said, we can get to composition later, but
well, that's a tough thing, because first that there's parameters of certain things that if I'm arranging somebody else's stuff, I hope they trust me to make some decisions. And if they give me a portfolio of things to arrange, I hope that they trust me to say, look, this works better than this.
right.
And this one works not so well as this, or, So I hope that they can trust me, because I've been doing it a long time, to be able to do that. And that can be very tough. I'll be upfront. It can be very tough with singers, because they get very, very personally attached to certain tunes.
I've never experienced that before in my life.
No, we never have.
What?
And sometimes you have to sit down and say, look, this is going to be hard to arrange. There are tunes that you actually sound better on, that I've heard you sing. Mm-hmm. I've got some tunes that I might suggest to you, blah, 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 blah. So, I mean, that's the first thing, is that it's picking stuff that works, or you kind of have the foresight to think it will work. And that's part and parcel to that Ives project.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, there were a number of things that just kind of weren't going to work so well, and then there were the things that I ultimately came up with. And
it's a standard big jazz, configuration of horns.
Yeah.
You didn't add like French horns or
no. And that was part of the thesis.
Yeah,
that was part of it. Is that I limited myself to say, it's got to work. And I made a comparison. I made a comparison while I was going through the Ives stuff, is that, okay, so I felt like we needed something that had an Americana feel, something that had kind of Americana things embedded in the music. And you could say, okay, well, does Samuel Barber have that? Does Aaron Copland have that? In terms of the classical side, that would be able to, push you in a different direction. Mm-hmm. Well, I checked out their songs, because they had, art songs, Leader, they had those things, but they just didn't do what they were supposed to do. And I was asked this weekend at this film preview, when I did a talk afterwards, people asked me, they said, well, did you use Ives orchestration? And I said, no way. That's my orchestration. Yeah. No, because it's not going to work. I'm the expert at that. That's where I come to the table. Right. And I take the lead sheet just as I would take Ellington. I'm not going to, just as if you were to take the A Train, I am not going to really, I'm going to sure, I've listened to his big band arrangement of Take the A Train, but I'm going to do my version of Take the A Train and try and give due respect to what's going on. But just like that, it's mine to make it happen for the big band. So I had to just take I said this weekend, I took the lead sheet, and from there, it's me. I have to interpret it, and there are many things.
And for listeners like lead sheet, you're taking the melody and
the chords
and his changes
as is,
and
right?
The essentials of the
essentials, and then you flush it out from there. Yeah.
Right. I do all the orchestration. I've got to do a lot of writing, because you can do the exposition of the thing, just the statement of the tune, but there's a lot more writing that you have to do beyond that, because you have to start spinning out a lot of different things and make it interesting for a long period of time. So. That's a difficult thing. How I arrange. I could get on the micro level of talking about certain techniques and stuff like that, but I think you have to make good intuitive decisions, and it's kind of educational or an educated intuition is what I'm trying to say that I'm bringing to the table. Yeah. And sometimes that intuition, I look at something and it's like, man, this just isn't going to work. I don't, that's tough,
Memphis is just all sorts of sounds tonight, man.
Yeah, we got lots.
Hey, so would the Ives project, would that be considered like a one-off, or is this maybe like, would you tackle another composer in the same way, or is it?
Well, well, there is a thing in the works, and I've done the beginnings of 2 different charts of Alban Berg's music.
Nice,
but that would have to be done over there. And I have my spy in place now. The guy who was the producer, Louis Bonilla, who's the trombone player on the Ives album, and he was with the Vanguard Jazz Orchestra.
All right.
Well, he just left New York about 2 months ago, and he's now the trombone professor in Graz, Austria.
Okay.
And so he and I have already talked about doing a Berg thing, because that's where Berg's from, Austria.
For big band.
Yeah, for big band.
Wow.
Berg for big band. I've already done something that's from his early leader, and I've got started a chart which is it's the lullaby from Wozzeck. It's the first in the second act, the first part where the mom is singing to the kid.
Man, that is a odd scene. I mean, it's a beautiful scene, but it's a dark kind of.
Yeah, it's very dark.
Yeah.
No, so
as a musician, is this like? Do you get to experience like everything firing off? Like the classical side, the jazz side. Like, or is this just something like what's the experience in pulling these elements together? What's that like?
Well, it's not, Carla. It's not always easy. Right now, with the thing I'm doing as we speak, it's taken me a few weeks to kind of get it feels like you're rolling a big cement, ball that is like 2 times as high as you, and once you get it rolling, it's okay. But boy, that
until
first,
you want to stop it.
Right, exactly.
Because you don't want it to sound forced. You don't want it to sound
exactly.
Like,
exactly. So, I don't know. One of the things that I came up with in that, I was having trouble. I'll give you for instance of writing and arranging and stuff, is that the third movement of the violin sonata, which I wasn't able to post because of some technical problems that we had, though we have a good recording of it for off the recording sessions, is that and we all have our techniques, but I was having problems coming up with ideas for the third movement, and I didn't want to rewrite the second movement or the first movement, and so I had just heard one of our students do the Hebert, the Jacques Hebert, what's it called? The Concerto da Camera of Jacques Hebert. And there are some certain parts of that I like a lot. Mm-hmm. And I stole from it. I did. I mean, there's some really neat things in there that work really well, and so I did it, but I made it my own.
Yeah,
and Ellington's quoted this, and several other people. It's just you don't borrow, you steal.
Right.
And you make it your own.
It's the cliche. I mean,
right.
The good borrow and the great steal.
Yeah, right. So and it's funny because when Mike got on the campus and I had just come back from Berlin over the summer, and we were sitting. He was kind of putting his stuff into his office and everything, and I had had a CD with me of the thing, and I said, "So check this out," mm-hmm. So I played in the third movement and immediately had this huge smile on his face. Oh man, Hubert, that's great. It sounds great. So, I mean, he knew what I had done, and there's nothing wrong with that. He just loved the piece. And, the thing is being able to do that in a genuine, sincere way and you make it your own. So I don't know. It comes from a lot of different directions. I was just writing. Okay, I'll tell you another one is that I was just writing last night, trying to get a lot of ideas. I got some nice ideas down last night for this thing for the New Zealand Jazz Orchestra, and I had been teaching 2 weeks ago the Donald Fagen tune in class. What's the name of that tune? It's the one where the
Steely Dan or his own or
no, it's from his own. It's the one where he's at the resort and he gets the goodbye look.
Yeah,
the goodbye look, and it has all those different. It has all those different chords from harmonic minor and melodic minor. He does all that chord borrowing, and he's a master of it. He's really, really good. But he does it in a way that's so inventive. It doesn't sound like that.
You don't even notice it.
No, you don't notice it.
Yeah.
You don't notice it. All of a sudden he's using third mode of harmonic minor to resolve, to have this tension to resolve after you've already had a 5-1. And so I was going through, and all of a sudden I heard that. I was trying to come up with a thing at a point. It's like, oh well, okay. There's the +5 major 7 chord, and it's right. It's that chord. It's like the E over C chord. I'm using it as F sharp over D.
Now we're getting really nerdy for the listeners, but trust me, it's good stuff.
Well, but you see the thing.
There's got to be a YouTube video.
Yeah, I know, right?
And E over C.
Yeah,
go to a piano and play.
Yeah. Well, but you see, it could come from anywhere, and that's very inspiring. I teach it, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, that's Donald Fagen, and so I'm stealing from Donald Fagen and putting it into all of a sudden putting it into a chart that I'm doing.
That's one, total side note, but I took my wife's folks to Branson early on in our marriage, and that's when the Lawrence Welk Theater was still going strong.
Right.
Smoking players, by the way.
Yeah, I worked for them. I've done the show 3 times.
And we were able to catch the Sunday matinee of the Lennon Singers. It was a trio, 2 guys and a girl, smoking like this, but they nailed that whole big band vocal form. Mm-hmm. And they're playing these hits and all the repertoire from that era, post World War II, all that stuff. Right. And all of a sudden they dropped in "Walk Between the Raindrops." Huh. Which is a total off that record, off the Night Fly. And I'm sitting there going, holy smokes, man. They just dropped a Donald Fagen song.
That's great.
But everyone else was just, nodding their heads like, oh, that's wonderful. That's a great little swing. I went to him in the lobby afterwards. I'm like, you nailed that Donald Fagen song. That was awesome. They looked at me like, oh, yeah.
Well, since we're geeking out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. And this is a Memphis story, actually.
Okay.
So I saw Prince at the Pyramid when shows were still going on at the Pyramid.
Right.
Which, now it's Bass Pro Shop. And for about 8 seconds in the middle of, I forget the tune of Prince's that they were playing, but Prince grabbed the bass, and of course his bass player, and I forget who it was at the time.
The Rhonda, the girl?
Yes.
Rhonda.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
I'm spacing on her name.
Right. So for about 8 seconds, they played Stanley Clark's Lopsy Lou.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And Amy and my wife looked at each other and we were like, and because it was so cool, they did that for the 16 people in the audience that knew that. And it was
so maybe
so
we
cool.
address this at the top when we were talking about Memphis, but coming full circle now, you've developed as an artist here, and you've grown, and so could you say like your hopes for Memphis could be like, hey, let's take all this rich seed and grow some new stuff. Is that kind of in a sense what you're hoping for?
Yeah, sure. I think that there need to be some entrepreneurs with some foresight to be able to do that, and understand a little bit and be into the music and being able to do some of that. I think that there are certainly, as I said, I think there are groups from here, and will be upcoming young artists that will come through here because of the unique combination of things that come here. But or come through here. I'm trying to say, but there's got to be someone willing to back them, because everybody's got somebody that's willing to do that. I will say this. Let's go back to this. I tell my students this, and this is really important. I just did a master class on this at the school. Is that you may not know this about that album, is that when that was all going on about 4 years ago now, I had to raise $18,000 in 25 days.
Wow.
Yeah, wow is right.
Oh, you did the
I did an Indiegogo.
I participated in that.
Well, and I appreciate that. No, and I appreciate that, and I do. Is that but see, the thing is that before and you saw the whole thing go down, is that look, before I even started that, is that we had the recording session. It was, of course, done right with the top level players. I happen to be good friends with and have a very good relationship with David Bradford, who's a very good videographer here. He's an independent guy who works for CNN and MSNBC and does on location stuff of news footage, and he's very good. So I asked David for some help, and he deals with the Mid-South Jazz Foundation, and both him and Jack Schaefer helped a lot. They donated their time. They spent a lot of time doing this. They wanted to see it happen. They were guys who wanted to see a person in Memphis have some success. They recognized it was important, though it was a bit obscure but it's very Americana. And so that whole thing was put together in a nice package, as you saw.
Yeah.
It was a very nice package that we put together. So at that point, any investor wants to see a professional product. They want to see that. And so the quintessential call, there were a number of people who donated in a big way to that, and to make that last 18,000 happen. And so my wife and I were thinking about Berlin. We were making a visit that summer. Unfortunately, I came right in the middle of that Indiegogo. So we're sitting there in Berlin for 5 days, and I get a call in the middle of the night, because it's different time there than it is here. And it's Rudy Scheid on the phone. And he said, I saw the video. You'd sent it to me. It looks great. It's a fantastic project. What do you need? And I said, well, I don't know. We can talk about different things. And he said, where are you at right now? And I said, well, I think we were at about 8,000. We had gotten to 7,000 or 8,000. And he said, how's 5? And I said, 5 would be fantastic.
Yeah.
And that's the one that put us really in the strike zone, and I was able to approach people also and say, look, Rudy put in 5, and then I got another one to put in 800, and another one to put 1,500 in it. Like the Jack Belts put in $1,500 all of a sudden. Wow. So it was piece by piece by piece. But what I try and tell my students is that you have to present yourself in a professional way. It can't be just kind of screwing around, just kind of, excuse the expression, half-assed. It cannot be. You cannot do that, And unfortunately, and that's why I get so upset many times when I'm teaching at the University of Memphis, because if I have a student starting to do that, it's like, nobody will back you. Nobody will back you.
I think that's universal. I think that goes in any field.
Well, of course
right?
it is.
I mean, right?
But of course it is.
But why is it in music we feel like,
Yeah.
Well, I think it's the message that gets sent, and that a lot of kids see on YouTube, and they see these different artists doing these different things, and they feel like, oh, well, I can do whatever I want. Well, no, you can't do whatever you want. And there's a lot to this. And so I try and tell them that story, but I try and tell them other people's stories too. But I mean, damn, I had to come up with $18,000 in 25 days.
That's amazing.
Well, but it was being professional about it. And it was, I don't know many people that have done what I did. I just don't. I mean, so it's hard to do.
Yeah. We before we started, we talked about Post Malone, this rap phenom. He was just on, not Kimmel, but, the late night talk show.
Not Seth, but
anyway. So here's a guy who his story is just like, delivering pizzas or whatever, hanging out, smoking a lot of stuff, and just literally like got his name off a rap generator, and just stepped into like whatever he put out on SoundCloud became this very fashionable thing. He's now a thing,
right?
But I can tell you right now that he just I think he just got called, or he's doing the next Spider-Man. He's full on industry now. But I bet his world has changed from just kind of goofing around and sharing one room with 7 other guys to where he has a team of people, and I'm sure someone is in his face saying like, you got to think about being legit. Like there was this realm where it was you could just kind of be like haphazard, chance, half-assed, however you call it, and now it's like. You've established this thing, consistency. How do you keep producing consistent work? You just. Hey, real quick, Memphis Machine would like to thank Snakebite for their sponsorship of the podcast. Snakebite, made in America, makes the best keychain, beer, bottle opener, and folding fork church key, along with their excellent professional bartending tool, the Mamba. You can check out Snakebite at www.snakebiteco. That's snakebiteco.com.
That's tough.
I'm sure there's all what I'm trying to say. I'm sure there's now a team of people
making him
become
professional.
Yeah, like Katy Perry has several employees. It's not just she has a whole brand that she is
right
having to upkeep and sustain.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, it's a very difficult thing, and I know. I don't know if I should say it, but I'll use a name that both I have one of my older sisters is a stylist in Los Angeles, and she's worked for a lot of different people on set doing costuming and backdrop, what's in the background and so on. And ironically, she and I have worked for Macy Gray. I was on a TV show. I was the contractor for an orchestra for it was a big MSNBC telethon. It was after the hurricane that was Katrina. Was it Katrina?
New Orleans, the big one?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was. Yeah, and it was the one that hit Mississippi, New Orleans. Yeah, it would be Katrina, I think.
Yeah.
And so, I had to contract the thing, and I was actually called by people in Hollywood that I knew that said, "Oh yeah, we talked to different people, and you're like our contact guy because you know how this is supposed to go. You'll get the right people called." And I did, and it was a very good orchestra. And in fact, Harold Wheeler from Dancing with the Stars was the musical director of that.
Wow.
Yeah. So, excuse me, it was pretty heavy hitter. So. All the musical acts were really quite good. Brian McKnight was on that. Ray Romano was on that. I mean, it was a whole list of people. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, Macy Gray was on it. And she's had a lot of problems. She's had a lot of personal problems. And it was some of the most unprofessional behavior I've ever seen on any gig I've been on. It was pretty bad. But that was, and she got slam dunked by Harold Wheeler. I mean, basically, he said, "You will not be on it. You're showing up late," and she was messed up.
Wow.
I mean, she showed up messed up.
Yeah.
And he said, "You're done. You're done. You're not on the show now. I won't do it." The producer came screaming out on stage, "Oh, you can't do that!" And he said, "Oh, yes, I can. Oh, yes, I can. These people in this orchestra have worked very hard. She will not be on the show," and she wasn't.
Wow.
But see, that's the kind of stuff that happens, but it's consistency, and it was consistent. Unfortunately, she's been consistently not good. Uh-huh. She had her kind of day in the sun a few years back, as you guys know.
Right.
And I don't have anything. I don't have any problems with those hits that she had and everything. I mean, they're been vintage. She's got a unique voice, but she's had some very unprofessional behavior. And the point is, my sister saw it too. We compared stories, and she was the costumer for Macy Gray, and she said she was impossible to work with.
Wow.
She was unruly. She was late all the time. She didn't help at all. In terms of dealing with stuff. So the point is that. Young people, they would be wise to behoove the advice that some of us that have actually dealt with this. I walk in like I'm some old man or something. These kids think I'm some old fart, and then I start talking about something like that, a more contemporary artist, and I say, well, I've been on set. I've been on a TV show or a recording session or this and that with them, and they're like, oh, really? It's like, well, but that's what I do.
In an earlier podcast, James Dukes, what did he hammer at? Work ethic.
Yeah, work ethic.
He was, even when he takes on a new artist, he even sets up almost like a sensei, almost like test of like, hey, can you show up on time? We agreed that you'd be here at 8:00, and his
right. Yeah, there's a purging, or
a probation, almost exactly. A probation, to where where he's going to vet an artist. Like, can you hang with, because his mortgage is on the line.
Well. And that's the thing about that's the thing that I have to tell kids about and younger artists, is that it's not about them. It's not about them. It's about that person you're working for and their connections and their gig. You are on their gig.
Right.
They're not your gig.
Yeah.
It's not your gig. It's their gig. And whenever I send people out on different touring bands or something, when contractors call my phone at work, and I'm very upfront with the contractor. I don't have anybody at this time. And it's like, well, yeah, they may not be as musically competent for that gig, but they may be unprofessional. I don't have anybody professional.
Wow.
And then when I do refer them to that. Mm-hmm. Right now, I just had 2 gigs pop up on my phone that I was able to refer. I've got some good ones right now that happen to be able to fill the bill. But it doesn't always happen.
Right.
That doesn't always happen. And I'm not going to send out a bad one. I will not do it.
Well, it comes back to you. Right?
Yeah, it comes back to me because I want more of those things. I want more of those things for them. And it's not necessarily even about me. It's about getting them gigs, but I'm not going to send out a bad one because it cuts my pipeline off.
Yeah.
So, it happened to me. One of the things that happened to me recently, where I got tested like that, and it was a drag, but I knew it was coming. It was dealing with Jiggs Wiggum, and Jiggs he's a genius. He's a musical genius, a trombone player.
Okay,
and Jiggs is the co-director of the Berlin Jazz Orchestra. Well, the guy who's the other co-director is Mark Sakara, who's a very good vocalist, and he's a And Mark's younger, and he already knew. He knew, well, this guy knows what he's doing. He's younger than me. Mark's about 43 now. So he kind of knew, and he talked to Jiggs, and Jiggs is, God, he's over 70 years old now. So, but the point is that, so I go, I get all these charts done. I got about half the album done for the band. Unfortunately, for the first reading with the group, is that I had to fly back here just before it, and I got stuck here in the snow in Cincinnati at the Gin conference, and I didn't make it back in time for the rehearsal. And I thought, okay, I see what's coming. Jiggs is now conducting my charts, and I'm not there. So he conducts through the charts. He's got wrong tempos. Oh. He's not understanding some things on the charts. And so Mark makes a tape of it, and I listen to the tape, and there's some things wrong, and Mark and I talk about it. And he said, yeah, I understand. He said, well, Jiggs wants to talk to you. And I said, what does he want to talk about? And Mark says, he wants to talk to you. I said, okay, I get it. So what happens is Jiggs invites me up to the restaurant at the top. You know the DDR Space Needle in Berlin, like the one.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and they've got the restaurant like Seattle and Dallas. He invites me there and says, "Oh yeah, we'll have dinner out and blah 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 blah." Everything's so we go up there, and he knows the waitress. He goes, "Oh yeah, anything on the house, blah 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 blah." So we order and everything, and she takes off, and he watches her leave, and he starts doing this to me.
Shaking his finger.
Yeah, he starts getting into my face about it.
Gosh.
And I just sat there and was like, okay. I knew it was coming because I knew his reputation for doing this kind of stuff about, and it's him just blowing off steam to tell you how great he is, Well, and he's trying to tell me what to do and everything, and eventually it all came out in the next rehearsal is that he saw I knew exactly where every note was placed.
Right.
Everything was on time. Everything was done professionally. The guys in the band knew what was going on and dug the charts, and Mark knew what was going on. So, I had to prove myself because, I had that night at dinner, I had to listen to Jig's resume.
Yeah.
He had to tell me how great he is, and blah, 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 which that. I mean, if you're in the jazz world, you know this guy, and you know what he's all about. And he is. He's a damn genius. I mean, I saw one night on the first gig that I did that I was the MD for, is that the bass player, we were in Midtown, in Midtown, and the bass player on the first break, he takes off and didn't come back because he went to go have beer somewhere and came back late. And so, we're in the green room and a couple of people start taking off in the audience, and Jig's all, man, we got to go on now. And he turns to me and he said, you know the charts? And I said, yeah, I think I know the charts. I listen to everything and I can kick them off. And he goes, okay, you're conducting the band now for everything. And he gets up there and Jig's read the bass.
Nice.
He's a great bass player beyond his trombone player, and he's a good piano player too. I heard him do that. So he's really old school genius. He can do it all kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing you have to deal with. And I'm not going to sit there and argue with Jiggs Wiggum. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I'm not going to over dinner and with people around and stuff. I'm not going to sit there and get into a battle with him. Why? There's no use. And I knew as I was old enough and mature enough, as it'll subside, it'll be okay, and it'll that's basically was Mark's message to me. It's like, well, he wants to talk to you. You know what's coming.
So dealing, keeping in mind excellence, consistency, and just rolling with it.
Right. And sometimes you have to roll the punches. And I mean, you guys are old enough. I mean, you've been on enough gigs to know that kind of crap happens. And especially for me, I mean, hell, I've moved my family over to Berlin and everything. And that's my main gig is to be writing for that big band, to be their staff writer. I'm not going to jeopardize that.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you could get in my face. No, it's not worth it, man. Have a nice dinner, have some wine, let him chill out, have a few drinks. He'll be okay, because he tried to push his weight around, and I was okay, it's cool. And I knew how to get around that, is that he and I have a lot of mutual friends, like Manny Album and Bud Shank and other guys in L.A., especially because Jiggs for a short time lived in L.A., and then he lived mainly in New York before he had migrated to Germany. So he and I talked about, and people I know over there, like I mentioned Rob Pronk earlier and some others. And so I just brought up those guys in his generation of people, and we talked, and I said, oh yeah, blah, 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 blah. And so it kind of chilled him out and calmed him down. So, I mean, you have to have some personal acumen. There's
diplomacy.
There's got to be some, Carl, there's got to be some diplomacy, man. And you got to learn that. And that's not always a priority with some of the younger people that I deal with. I mean, one of the things, to kind of make a long story longer, is that one of the things when I have composition students is that, and it's like their first or second tune they've written, and they bring it to me and they say, oh, what do you think of the tune? And so I say, well, there are some good aspects to it, but something needs to be done here, and then at this point where it transitions, into this other part, you might want to do something here, and I have a suggestion here, and then you need to write another section. You need to do more writing. It's too short, or something like that. And they don't want to hear it. Oh boy, they don't want to hear it, and they especially don't want to hear. It's like, well, and what always happens with that is like, well, this is good. Keep writing. You need to write a lot more. And
like constantly.
Right. You need to write constantly. It's just like practicing your instrument. You've got to play and you've got to write. That's the first thing that was said to me when my first lessons were with Tom Rainier, and Tom has done a lot of stuff for CBS and for Disney, and he's done, and of course he does a lot of playing, but he said it's his quote, and I say this to my students, is just like practicing your instrument. You have to practice it. You have to do a lot of it, and you have to do a lot of it before you start sounding good.
Yeah.
It just doesn't come about. You know?
Yeah, I mean, speaking of stuff like that, and then coming back to things we were talking about earlier with work ethic and, professionalism and everything. So, you seem to be pretty busy, right? Traveling, writing for a lot of stuff. So, how would you describe, your work ethic, or, I don't know, do you have daily routines or anything like that kind of?
Well, I mean, that's a tough thing. It's the next gig coming up.
I got you.
It's always the next gig coming up, whether it be playing or writing. And I guess I have good habits when I sit down and write in terms of coming up with things. I have certain devices, certain harmonic or melodic things that I want to do in terms of developing themes and melodies and, harmonic structure and the overall piece and stuff like that. So I have some tricks that I have, a bag of tricks. But my thing is always, especially for writing, is a due date situation. I have to know when the due date is coming up for a project and be able to project out, well, I've got between now and the next 2 or 3 months of when this is due, I've got this and this and this and this going on. And okay, I can be able to do it and I'll be able to make it happen. So it really is being professional in terms of projecting, knowing what I'm capable of in what time frame, and being able to deliver, being able to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, recently there was one thing, and there was no promise necessarily made. It was kind of open-ended, and I was offered to do something for a very good group. The album, and I just saw the album had come out of what they were aiming for, and I just couldn't get that done for them. I didn't make any promises. They said, "Hey, we'd like this if you can get it done." And I'm like, "Well, if I'm writing for you, I will be writing for an album. And when would that come out? Oh, we don't know. We don't, And so it was like there wasn't really a hard and fast commitment on either side. So with all these other things, in the meantime, this second album came up with Mike Waldrop, and he had hard due dates. Like he had money to pay and hard due dates. And, other projects had come up in the meantime. And so just this kind of flimsy commitment, and not by anybody's fault, it just has, it went by the wayside. And then I just saw that the album that I would have written for came out, and it's like, I first thought, oh, well, that's too bad. But then I thought, well, and I think about all the other projects that I have going on, and it's like, well, we had no firm commitment, and I guess I'm asking because you kind of have those two. I mean, granted, these are sort of extremes, but you had the approach to creating, whether it's writing fiction, nonfiction, or music, whatever. Right.
That the one extreme sits around waiting for a muse, while the other has, okay, these 4 hours every day, I'm going to write whatever it is that I'm going to create. I'm going to write, so like the Stravinsky approach or the Stephen King approach, right?
Right. No, they went to work and they did that. They had an office where they went and did that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The thing is that I wish. Well, I will say this. The good thing about being away from here for the whole year when I was on sabbatical, I was teaching 1 day a week. I was teaching 2 different classes 1 day a week. And, but I had a regular schedule. I was able to keep a regular schedule, and I had a ton of writing to do. I had one whole album to do, then I had part of another album, then I was getting some writing work from back over here, and then also had some writing work from the outside. Like at the last minute, there were a couple of different projects for symphony orchestras that I got over there that literally I got called. It was a funny story about due dates and getting things done on time. So my friend Mark, the singer, he'd already seen a lot of my work and seen how well I work. And so it was funny. So on a Sunday afternoon, I get this call from him, and he's whispering, and you hear these people in the background, this kind of rehearsal going on. And he said, "Man, you got to save me. You got to help me out here, because the chart that this guy wrote," and the guy was like standing right over here.
Oh, no.
Read the chart. He goes, you're going to have to rework this whole chart.
Oh, no.
I'll do whatever you need me to pay you. Can you do it?
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. And so he's like on the phone like this, like talking to me, trying not to let this other guy hear it. And I said, yeah, what do you need, Mark? And so he described to me. It was a lift of a Sinatra thing, and then I had to put it in a new key and stuff. And I can do that very quickly. I've done lots and lots of it. And for a full symphony orchestra. And it had to be done. It was Sunday afternoon. It had to be done by Tuesday night. So,
okay.
which
Lynn, I want to ask, like, if you watch any interviews of film composers, their target time of stuff they want to get done during a day is between 2 to 3 minutes. Is that? Do you think in those terms of like I'm accomplishing like a pop song being 3 to 5 minutes orchestral work, but like depending upon what's going on that you're creating or arranging, like do you think in terms of like I'm getting this much
stuff done? Well, yeah, you do, and how many measures that will be and stuff, and it depends on and it depends on how many things need to be orchestrated. If it's a full, if a string section, if it's and brass section and reed section, I mean, shoot.
Well, if you think like a large symphonic film score, if the guy's carving away and gets 2 to 3 minutes of score done a day, that's.
Well, right. No, I mean, right. If you can knock that out, that's actually quite a bit of music.
Yeah.
Depending on the score, 2 or 3 minutes.
Right. I would have to have a full day. I would have to have a full day to knock out that much full orchestration to have it like complete and all, because, I mean, I do it in, kind of back to your question, John, is that I do it in layers. I kind of have melody lines and different counter melody lines and so on, and going through, and then I have somewhat of a harmonic structure, and I write that down, and or some key bass notes in certain harmonically placed spots, and then I put another layer of things on, start to do some certain voicings here and there and so on, and then another layer of stuff, and then it starts to complete. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. Yeah. Is that you get the easy fitting pieces, and then you start to work your way in, and the other pieces that are all the same color, like Mickey Mouse's ears in the Mickey Mouse puzzle, and his ears are all black, and so you've got a bunch of black pieces, and so at that point it starts to get a little bit more difficult.
Now, is that what you found to be, or do you find that with other composers, arrangers? Is that a typical, almost like get a spinal cord and then start to dress the spinal cord out with other and you don't, and most composers hear and see the important parts. I only know one guy, and it's a close friend of mine, and he just retired from the Army Band in Washington, D.C., and like Sam was working for the National Symphony. He literally writes. He kind of has it in his head, and he literally writes measure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Wow.
Paul's the only guy I know that does that. But most of us kind of get the important parts. Like I put the intro last. Oh. I write my intros last because I want it really derived. I want it to connect and to be from something inside, so it's telling you what's coming up. Yeah. And
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. So I'll have some of the exposition of it, and then I'll have some other parts, and then I'll generally jump all the way to the end and then move backwards.
Right.
That's almost like is that how Agatha Christie wrote her?
Is going to the end and then coming back.
Is that how she wrote her mystery? Agatha Christie. Start at the end and then work.
Right. And I think actually a lot of novelists do that too.
Right.
That the ending has to be good.
Yeah.
And then you work from the ending backwards through the piece, and then you connect all the dots of it. And when I've seen film directors, they do the same thing too. Good film directors are able to do that, and every time it's interesting, because every time I see a film where it comes to the ending, I'm like, oh man, why did I go see this film? This is like really bad, and the ending just didn't make any sense. Why would they do that to that story? And you go back through and And I've read about the screenplay, and it's like, well, there were 5 different people working on the screenplay, and it never came together right, and blah 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 blah.
Right.
You know, so there you go. There's a cohesiveness to large artworks like that in terms of being able to do that and see the entire picture. And that's the main thing that I teach is that you have to be able to see the entire picture at some point. Mm-hmm. Okay, I hear where it's been, I hear where it's going, I hear where it is right now, you know, and that's a tough thing to do, to be able to have that all, to be able to have the vision in your mind's eye of the whole thing all at once, you know, and all the inner workings of the part. So, you know, the thing is in terms of, you know, kind of further answering your question, I guess in the long explanation I gave is that's my methodology. Yeah. You know, it's a jigsaw puzzle, and you're working your way from different sides to get the jigsaw puzzle all together and make it cohesive. You know, there's not necessarily one way. You know, you have a main theme, and then you kind of say, oh, well, man, I now see a thing on the, you know, when we have the recapitulation of the piece, I hear this being that down there, and go to that, and it's like, okay, now I kind of hear something in the middle, and now, oh my gosh, I hear the ending now, and then you write the ending, and then once the ending's done, I pretty much come back through and put all the icing on the cake. Right.
Nice.
You know, then I can come back and then like put everything into the place. Once I know exactly where it's going to end up and where it's going to end, then I'm clear. I'm clear on everything else, you know, because at that point you have the frame around it. Now you have the frame around everything, and you see where everything fits in the frame. You know, does that make sense?
That's lovely. I think that's great.
Yeah.
I heard a metaphor once of James Woodard up at SIU. He said, you know, it's like taking a simple country girl to the ball. Yeah, I mean, she's lovely, but she's plain, and you're going to put her in this gown, you know, and it's going to be this lovely evening. You know, from the countryside to the castle, you know.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's a good metaphor. I mean, I've heard any number of metaphors about this stuff, but I mean, I always use the jigsaw puzzle thing. Is that it's you gotta start on the easy things, and then you work your way in. And that's why a lot of times I have guys, when they first start with me, they have to transcribe. I make them do a transcription first, because transcribing is almost identical to writing something. Is that there's stuff you hear here, you're hearing it here in your mind first,
exactly,
and you hear transcribing it, and you get the easy things, you get all the measures, you count the measures, you count. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, and you get every single measure laid out on the page. Right. It can be tedious, yes, but you get it laid out on the page. Then you start filling in the notes, and you get the easy ones. You get the easy ones first, and then you'd be surprised how easy it gets, because, oh, this sounds like this, and now these 2 things sound like this, and so I can transcribe that. And now these 3 things, this most difficult thing, sounds like these 3 things kind of put together. Yeah. Well, lo and behold, that's how it was composed.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. So yeah, when I have taught, like, you know, music appreciation classes, you get to people like Liszt, you know, and you know, you're trying to explain to the class, you know, this is a transcription, right? And it you know, it's. To me, teaching context or not, you know, it's kind of a reverse composition, right?
Oh, that's what I call it.
You know, because it's
that's what I call it. Yeah.
You know, you get to, you know, really kind of hear what, you know, Beethoven might have heard and those as he was writing before all the orchestration and everything like that. It just happens to be a little fancier because it's Liszt. You know?
Right.
But
that's but that's exactly what I call it. I gave a lesson to this girl who's a very talented girl who's writing for the number 1 band at North Carolina, at the University of North Carolina, which is a pretty good college band. It's quite good. And I talked to her about that thing, and I said, you have to do some transcribing. And I said, it's reverse composition. It's reverse composing, is that you're hearing it, you're coming this way, and then you're taking the pen and putting it back on the page.
Right.
Yeah. So it's not being pulled off the page. You're putting it on the page, and you are internalizing it and then putting it on the page. And so you can envision it. It's not just, yeah, I've looked at the score. I mean, we can talk about looking at scores, about what's interesting and so on, but I don't know if I've really. There's some scores I remember in terms of looking at it and everything, but I'm going to tell you what, the stuff I can actually visualize when I hear it comes through me transcribing.
Right.
Because I've got it here. I've got the sound. It's like I hear that sound. It's like, oh, I know exactly what that is because I have put it on paper and it's this. And there's kind of no other way around it to me. I mean, you can sit there and mess around with a MIDI program or those kinds of things all you want, but in terms of accuracy and really getting it and really, really knowing it, really knowing exactly the way it is that you have to do that. And, I mean, one of the things that, and I have no bones about whether it's jazz or pop or whatever, and one of the things that, it seems like a parlor trick, but it's not. Is that? And I'm not a great piano player, but I can visualize the piano. Yeah. I have very good relative pitch. I don't have perfect pitch, but I have very good relative pitch. But so in the class that I was teaching in Berlin, 2 classes. It was 2 levels. It was level 3 and 4 of ear training in their program at that school, undergraduate, and. So they said, well, we're not a jazz school. These are commercial music degrees, which I knew coming in there. And I said, don't worry about it. I know a lot of tunes. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I did. And then I had the kids bring in their tunes too, because some of them are reasonably talented. Mm-hmm. Or I said, if you're not writing anything, then bring in something from your hometown in Amsterdam or from London, as there were a bunch of international students in that class, and so they'd bring stuff in, and so they would play on their iPhone or do something, or we'd hook it up to the speakers and they'd play through it, or it would be on YouTube, and so they play it, and I'd say, well, do any of you hear it? And there might be a couple of suggestions. Oh, well, I hear this and I hear that, and then I would start messing with it at the keyboard, and I said, you hear this, you don't hear this, and they'd start kind of correcting themselves, and then finally I'd say, well, it's this, and I'd go through like the whole tune, and they're like, how did you do that? It's like, well, I've been doing it a long time.
Right.
I can visualize it. I can listen to it, and I can automatically visualize it. And I know what key center we're in. And from the key center, there's a formula of the key center of all the different modes in the key center and the borrowing from other modes. And so I can do it at the very least by formula. Mm-hmm. So that's the best thing in terms of them being able to No, look, there are people that do this. There are the Donald Fagans and the Stings and the Stuart Copelands and the Paul McCartneys they do this. They can go through tunes. They can listen to a tune once or twice down and go, oh, okay, it's that. And it's not a surprise.
Right.
And it's really important. So the whole idea, that whole idea of how you go about composing, I don't know. It's no different than me hearing a tune and taking apart, listening to the tune once down and taking it apart. And it's especially important. I mean, kind of on a little bit different subject, but it's important. Is that I'm super disappointed every time this situation comes up where kids have tunes from a fake book and then the recording, and the fake book is like wildly off from the recording.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really poorly done. I mean, really poorly done, and that takes a lot of correction, And I found that to be true. I was trying to. There were several different tunes on that Songs of Berlin project that we're recording in just a few weeks in Berlin. Almost every single stinking modern fake book tune, like the David Bowie tune, Where Are We Now is wrong from the original record. Who's the guy? The the Velvet Underground guy that wrote that tune Berlin.
Lou
Reed.
Lou Reed.
That was wrong in the fake book.
You're talking like published?
Yes, published.
Like
I went to the library down the street. I went three U-Bahn stops down from our apartment, and there was a really good public library that I could check out a lot of different fake books and stuff. And so I got everything, like all the older stuff from like, I had to do a Hildegard Knef tune from like 1965, like those tunes. That tune, the Kurt Weill stuff was accurate. The thing Berliner Luft before it was accurate, but anything that was post like 1965, which was about 4 or 5 tunes, they were really off.
What do you think what was tripping them up? You think the guy?
I don't know. I don't know what they were doing, but these are published fake books.
Wow.
But that and the Pink Floyd tune was wrong too. The Great Day for Freedom, that tune, that was wrong. And I was like, well, like 80-70% of this might be right, but and I had to go to Mark, of course, and say, Mark, we're going with the recording.
Yeah.
I'm not going with the fake book. We're going with what's right, with what Pink Floyd actually did, because that's what's right. That's what they ended up with in the studio. So ultimately, you have to make some good decisions based on the information given to you, and half of that information may be bad information.
Yeah. Are you still writing by hand, or do you use all notation software?
I do. I will sit down and transcribe certain aspects by hand on a lead sheet, but when it comes down to after I've kind of got things planned out on the lead sheet, and or if it's an arrangement of a tune, I'll make notes on the lead sheet of the Cole Porter thing or whoever's tune it is. I'll make a bunch of notes and put all my substitutions in and everything, and then write new melody notes or alternate melody notes that I want. So I'll get that all laid out and have that right by my table, and then I start orchestrating and start doing stuff. And by that, pretty much after that, I'm pretty much on the computer.
What's your notation software of choice?
Well, I use Encore still. A lot of people don't use
really?
it, but I do use Encore.
I started on oh my goodness gracious.
Yeah, Encore I still use. I've gotten all the updates and everything, and it's just the easiest for me to use. Especially I think it works well on a Mac, and so I like using it. And I know people, of course, the industry standard is Finale, and Sibelius is another one that a lot of people use. Encore is like
Finale
Sibelius.
Man here. Maybe we can get all these companies to send us a check.
Yeah, there you go.
Encore. So is that still viable? Are they still going?
Yeah, I know the CEO.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, he's a cello player, and he's in Philadelphia.
That was my first notation software.
Yeah, well, it was the first one that got switched over from the old DOS kind of crappy thing to the new what you experience now in terms of graphically looking correct, whatever they call that level of. Whatever they call it in computer ease. But that was the first one to be able to do that. Unfortunately, Encore was too wishy-washy about making a decision of whether they were going to make it a kind of mixing sound program or a notation program. And you can't really, for mass marketing, you can't have both, because it takes up, as you know, way too much of a hard drive, and it takes up, Yeah,
I was going to say that. I mean, we might have to edit all this because they're geeking out over something.
I know, right?
But I mean, wasn't Encore the MIDI driver for Finale for a while or something?
Well, that was well. I'm not sure that was exactly what that was, but I think Finale took the idea from Encore and then said, we are going to be the notation program, what it is. And that's what they did. And that's why Finale was able to saturate the market, because they said, we are going to be the biggest, baddest, best notation program. We're not going to fool with all this other stuff and have MIDI and all this other. And Encore tried to be too many things at once. And you can't do that. Now, when it comes to Finale, it's gotten better, but Finale was making it very difficult because they had so many layers of things within Finale. It was kind of hard to navigate through Finale, through the program itself, because there were just too many things in as a notation program.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's not. It's really designed for a publishing company. It is.
Right.
That's it. It is that, and there are, very good notation or engravers is what is the name for the person. I know several guys who, when I was working for Warner Brothers, I would send them an XML file, and then they would have to make my XML file into a Finale program because I was using Encore. And like there's a friend of mine, John, what's John's last name? He's a bass trombone player, but he's up in Chicago, and he's a guru at Finale. And he did about 3 or 4 of my Warner Brothers scores, and you have to be able to negotiate through it. And I have an old version of Finale. I have to make PDFs.
Yeah.
In the end, I have to be my own copyist, and I have to make I have to get it, I have to spit it out, I have to then make PDFs and then send it off. And if there's a problem, I've got to correct it. But so ultimately, my PDF file is, the published file is what it ends up being.
Right, exactly.
So I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage when you talk about Encore and using Encore because most people use Finale, and more people use Sibelius than they do Encore. So
yeah,
I don't know.
I started on Encore. I loved it. It was and then Finale was kind of a mysterious.
Right.
And then I latched on to Sibelius is kind of what was my thing. So
sure.
Encore to Sibelius.
Yeah, it's more intuitive, as the Sibelius thing is a little bit more intuitive, like Encore is.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I'd shoot if I always think that if Richard, the CEO of Encore, if he goes away, if he passes before I do, then I'm kind of screwed, So, because I'm just afraid that nobody's going to want to carry the company forward and deal with it. But no matter. That's what I use is that.
So what's the future looking like for you as far as like you're spending time abroad and time back in Memphis and?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of different things. Oksana and I have now she's just turned 17. We have a 17-year-old kid. As my stepdaughter, her daughter, and we're trying to get her through the Hochschule, the high school level of stuff, and so she has options to either go to school here or go to school there in Berlin. Both Oksana and I have gigs over there, so I don't know. We were just talking about this the other day in terms of what are we going to be doing 5 years from now, and I don't know exactly. It depends what the future holds. I don't know. I mean, I'm still at my job here, and they're gracious about not imposing on me when I'm off contract, because professors really are. We have 9-month contracts, though our pay gets distributed over 12 months, but we are on a 9-month contract, and especially when I came to my sabbatical and the offer of going to Berlin and everything, I thought, well, I've always wanted to do this. I've wanted to tap into that market and do writing over there and possibly get on with a couple of the different big bands over there. So I don't know, Carl, we're kind of playing it by ear right now a little bit. I'm just kind of going project to project and trying to do some collaborations with some people. I'd like to, like I said, we were talking about earlier, is that I'd like to get the Album Berg thing possibly going. I wouldn't mind getting someone interested in doing an album of, all of my originals, over there. I wouldn't mind doing another album with my professional big band, which that's been 10 years, more than 10 years now that I've been able to do that, here in Memphis. But again, I've got to get some more gigs and do some things to, get that band up and running some more.
Which
and that's been a little bit, the Jazz Orchestra, the Delta.
Right. That's who you used to cut the Cole Porter.
Right, the Cole Porter album, which did well.
That's actually when you and I first met. I don't know if you remember. You did an arranging clinic when I was an undergrad at University of Southern Mississippi.
Okay,
and
right.
You were in the middle of that, just came out or something like that. Yeah. I was studying with Larry Piniella.
Yeah, right. And that album did well. And you know, it's tough because paying 17 guys is tough.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not easy.
It's like a small company.
Well, yeah,
I mean, really,
basically,
yeah,
she was,
yeah. So, and I've been trying to get on with GPAC and trying to. I've got to talk to Ron over at the Halloran Center. I've known Ron a while and been trying to deal with the Levitt Shell, and it's been challenging. Going back to the whole thing, and this is part of what you're talking about, is that it's been. While there have been advantages of being both here and in Berlin, there was a slight disadvantage, and I knew it was coming, is that when I took the sabbatical, is that everybody thought I'd just gone.
Oh, gosh.
I'd left. And it's like, well, no, you don't know what a sabbatical is, I guess. You're not very clear on what's going on here. And so it snuffed out all my gigs here, you know. I was like, you know, come back and like there are no casuals, there's no nothing because people are, well, you moved. It's like, no, I didn't move. I'm coming back and teaching. So, you know, when people see me traveling and so on, they go, well, you moved again. It's like, no, I'm not moving. I do a lot of travel. I'm on a plane a lot. So, you know, they don't understand. I mean, I guess they understand it a little bit more with someone like Kirk Whalum or someone like that. They get it because that's a more prominent personality who's out there.
Just say you're going on tour. You know,
and that's what I should say, that I'm just going on tour.
I'm going on tour
because everybody thinks I'm moving or something, and it's like, well, no, I'm not. We literally have a house here. We designed the situation. We designed our environment to work in what we're doing. Is that we had that house in Cordova. I owned that house for 16 years or something. And we had sold that house. We sold the house because we knew that we needed to not be paying insurance, not be paying for a lot of stuff anymore. And I needed to move closer to the university. And so I did. I'm just south of the university. I can ride my bike into work when it's warmer. And then we're renting that house, and the cost is a lot further down because you're not paying for a lot of things and not having to put a new roof on a house and repairs and stuff. That's the landlord. And then we have an apartment in Berlin, and we were able to we've been very, very lucky, knock on wood. We've been very, very fortunate because the two different apartments we've had in Berlin were reasonably cost, and we got them in a very timely manner. So we kind of designed our lives, the three of us, my daughter, my wife, we kind of designed it so we could do that, and we could do projects in Europe.
That's great.
To do that. So it takes a little explanation sometimes for people to understand, but my wife really pushed me hard to do that because she wanted to do it. And the other thing is that for someone who speaks 5 languages, I mean, she speaks 5 languages fluently. I mean, Memphis is just not that kind of, I mean, I hate to sound like that, but it's just not, that Berlin is much more to what she is and what she does. And she's a classical pianist, and there's much more of a classical music scene in Berlin. Right. It's much more thriving, and it always has been, it always will be in terms of that. In fact, it's a bigger scene than the jazz scene. But, once I explain it to people, and it's somewhat hard for them to understand it, it's a challenge for us as a family, and personally it's a challenge. But, that's what we do, Yeah. We have that going on. So to kind of put your question into a package, we're moving in a direction.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So it could stay the same, or you could be full-time Europe, or it could be...
I don't know.
Whatever. But it's work. You're making it work. Do you blog on that? Are you kind of sharing your experience of being bifurcated? Yeah.
Well, I don't. I don't necessarily blog, but I mean, when people ask, there are people who PM me and talk to me about it, and I'll give my reflections on it, because they'll ask questions about, well, how's this and how's that and what's going on with this and that.
Yeah.
I got asked a bunch of questions this weekend in North Carolina when I was doing master classes and stuff, and I tried to give some reflection on the culture there and what people think there, and in a musical sense, and then of course in a wider sense, because people always ask about that, because unfortunately, I don't want to sound the wrong way, but for guys like you that kind of know about stuff, there is a certain part of our population who has clearly no idea. They think you go to Berlin and you're going to see Nazis or something. I don't know.
Oh gosh.
Well, right, and it's like, well, that's not it at all. And
it's a wheel hub of European happenings, man.
Well, I know. But the other thing is I have to explain to him. I said, well, that's long gone, and there's only one guy I know who is even old enough in Berlin to have been, during that time, and he was a little kid when that was happening. He's from Berlin. He's actually a drummer, a very good drummer, and he still has a rehearsal band there, and he's been very nice to me. Shelley Bertram. He has 2 sons that are just in their 40s. And so, but the point is that he's the only guy I know of that age bracket,
right? Literally.
Now, when you start to talk about more people that are actually walking on the street that are more in my age, in their 50s or in their 40s, look, when you start to talk to those people, they have no connection to the 1930s.
Yeah.
They have no connection to the 1940s. Yeah. They know that from history books, just as you and I would know it from history books. Now, they do, it's interesting, they do have a kind of a connection to their past or their present, to the wall falling.
Yeah.
The wall being up and the wall falling.
Right.
And I've heard some very interesting stories from guys my age that were born around that time when the wall went up, and some horrifying stories, in fact, of families being split up and then finally brought back together. And the thing I talk to people about saying is that, look, time after time after time, both my wife and I, and she talks to a lot of Russian-speaking people, and she speaks much better German than me. Her because she's spending much more time over there than I am, and Anna does too. But the point is that you talk to person after person after the person, and they can reflect on that, and they reflect in a positive way about the wall falling and the reunification, and saying, finally, that silly, stupid, idiotic, I can use a lot of other expletives right now, wall is gone, and our families are just back together. Well, finally, we've been able to put all our families back together, and we don't have the government in our hair.
Yeah.
And if you start to understand that culture, and you understand those people like that, it's kind of interesting, because they don't understand us in terms of this bifurcation. There is still a bifurcation from, what is it now? Gosh, more than 150 years of the Civil War, and we're still in culturally we are. I mean, let's admit it, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, that's still happening in terms, and they don't get it. They don't want to get it. They're like, we don't. What are you talking about? Like, the wall falls here. We want to get back together, East and West. We just don't. We want that gone.
Mm-hmm.
Now, culturally, it's different from North to South. It is different, with South being a little bit more, if not more conservative by the time you get to Austria, than to the north. Berlin, Cologne, Hamburg, those cities are much more liberal type of northern cities. So there is a kind of a relationship that we share with them in that way, but still they're much more unified in many ways than we are here in terms of the way we think about things. Again, I mean, I don't want to get necessarily into the politics of it or anything, but it's kind of hard to explain to people. It's like, I hear people talking to me about Germany. It's like, so you've been to Germany? Like, because they seem so knowledgeable. I'm like, and I'm not trying to be a smart ass. It's like, so you've been to Germany? Oh, well, I've never been there, but it's like, well, You're talking to someone who lives there.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I don't know what to... And mind you, I haven't been to every single city in Germany. I've been to several, of course, and I've been all over Europe to different cities, and each city's a little different. Each region's a little different. So, I mean, someone talking about that over here and talking about what Germany is or isn't, or France is or isn't, or, it's like, well, you don't... I don't know.
Yeah.
So it pours, trying to get it back into, what we're talking about in terms of musical projects and everything, is that when I try and talk to people about it in terms of what's going on over there and what I have to deal with in terms of continuing on projects and everything, I have to be somewhat sensitive to those kinds of things. I mean, I've got some funny stories about some interaction with people. One in particular I can tell you that's kind of funny in a strange way, but and their perception of Americans.
Oh yeah,
this is their perception. So it's the first week that I'm teaching at the Hochschule der Popularen Kunst, the HDPK they call it, and so that building, and in fact, my new apartment is right here on Hauptstrasse, or Grunewaldstrasse, and Hauptstrasse is here, and so this corner of which is a main big two huge streets, the HDPK is in the 6th floor of this building. Now, in this park behind here is the judicial building. It used to be their Supreme Court building. It's now their regional building, judicial building. But this used to be the Supreme Court building, and that was where they signed off Jews to be sent to the concentration camps, to the death camps. So there is a history, and that's where the Potsdam Agreement was also signed too. The one that before when Perestroika was going on, they used that building to do that as a symbolic thing. Now we're making peace finally.
Wow.
Okay, so that's that corner, and so it's about 2 weeks into me teaching. It's a really beautiful day in October, and I'm looking out, and you can see into the Schöneberg area of Berlin. And so I'm looking out, and my boss comes walking up, Robert Lingnauer. Robert's a super nice guy. But he says, "Oh, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, it's such a beautiful thing in that building." And Robert immediately chimes in. He says, "Do you know what that building is?" I'm like, "Yeah, I have an idea." And he said, "Well, that's," he says immediately, he goes, "Well, that's the judicial building, blah, 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 blah. And, this is where they did the paperwork." Big frown. They did the paperwork here, and that, hey, they did the paperwork. They did the paperwork in this building on this corner. But now we have arts and music in this building, and part of the building is the Kunstuniversität, and then the HDPK here. You see, we've changed.
Oh my goodness!
Right. So he said, he's got his American person here. He's got the American person here that he's gonna, and I'm like, I get it. Now, that didn't happen only that one time. It happened 2 more times with 2 other faculty members. When I was between classes having a coffee, and I'm looking out the back window and looking at the view, and do you know what that building is? Yeah, I know what that building is. Okay, I get it. So you see, there's of what they perceive as what they hear roundabout coming from our news or our perception of things. And I've had that in Russia too, because my wife's Russian. She's from Khabarovsk, and I've had that perception or that reaction from Russians saying, "Well, we're really nice people." Yeah, I know you are. I know you are. I know you are. Yeah. You don't have to convince me of any of that and everything. So it's kind of sad in a way, because that's one of those things that you have to deal with when going to other places and other countries and so on. When I just did that, you probably saw, I think you may have reacted to it, or maybe both of you, is that right before school started, this semester started, I was in Bogota, Colombia for about 5 days. And gosh, everybody's reaction when I was going down there was, "Oh man, the drug lords are going to get kidnapped." And what?
Oh gosh!
No, that was back in the 1980s. But, that was a number of
Pablo Escobar is going to get you.
Right.
Like what?
And it's not that way. Now, there's a lot of traffic and they've got their problems, but it's not. But that's not happening.
Yeah.
Right now, they've gotten far more control over the country and what's going on, and you can kind of see it in a good way. But they have police presence on the. We went downtown a couple of times where the. Bogota's again, it's a unique city. It's high up in altitude. It's essentially like Denver.
Oh, wow.
And it's in a big bowl, so it's very enclosed and the traffic is very enclosed, which is a real big drag, but it's surrounded by mountains and it's a beautiful city that way. But it keeps things enclosed. And when you go downtown, there's a lot of people just packed into a small space. So they have security and police presence. Like one of the days they took me downtown to see, it's the Museo del Oro. That's the gold museum.
Yeah,
and it's incredible. It's phenomenal because it's all the gold that was mined and made into jewelry and everything, and religious artifacts from that whole area down through the Peruvian mountains, because that's one of the most in any area of the world. It had the most gold, most platinum, most silver, in the Andes along that coast. So there was real police presence there. Nobody messing around. Around those museums, because it's around kind of like their Lincoln Center area of museums and so on in Bogota. So, it's not, and the students were terrific. It was really, really a great visit, and the composition seminars I had 2 different composition seminars I did, and then I directed their big band and did a couple of other classes. They were just everything was great.
That's great.
Yeah. So, and that's, when I've been in Austria or teaching in Germany, teaching in Brazil, teaching in Bogota most recently, it's all been about the same. All the kids are good and the teachers are good and everybody's trying to do the right thing. So whenever I hear these projections, when I hear some kind of projection, it's like, well, I've been there and that's not my experience.
Right.
I've actually been there. And you're going to find some people who are difficult to deal with everywhere. And then there are mostly cooperative people, So, in terms of, in terms of difficulties, in terms of the projection of what I'm going to do next or next or next or next, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. You kind of roll the dice in some ways. It was a big roll of the dice to move to Berlin and be able to find an apartment and be able to consistently be there, for years to come. I don't know. I don't know what we're going to do. So
well, if you start a blog on that, I'm going to check that out.
Okay.
That sounds. And as far as prospective students wanting to check you and the university out, what's the best typical way to do that?
Well, you can look online. Of course, memphis.edu, and just go into the School of Music. Right now, we're trying to do a little bit of alteration, some different things with the jazz page, because now Sam's replaced Tim, and we've got
Sam Shoup.
Yeah,
yes.
He's there, and then also Mike Schultz is there new, and that's changed things for the better. It has, and we're gonna have to show the offerings that are real as opposed to the old stuff, and I've got to change that. But it's pretty accurate, and you can get a hold of us